Hello, fifth graders, and welcome to today's math lesson. For today, you will need your math resource binder, your 5A textbook, your 5A workbook, and paper and pencil. If you need to go get those things, please do so now, and then come on back. Our warm-up problems will be building off of yesterday's work and the day before, so go ahead and pause, give it a try. When you're done, come on back and see how you did. So remember, with mixed numbers, we're starting with our whole numbers. So 5 plus 2 is 7. Then we want to create equivalent fractions with common denominators. So in this case, our common denominators will be 12. So we multiply both of these by 4, we get 4/12. Both of these by 3, and we get 9/12. Then we add our numerators. Remember, our denominators should stay the same. Can we make this proper? Yes, we can. This is equal to 1 and 1/12. So we add and get 8 and 1/12. And then we check. Can we simplify? We cannot. So our answer is 8 and 1/12. Again, with our subtraction, we want to start with our whole numbers. So 3 minus 1 is 2. Then we create our equivalent fractions. Our common denominator is going to be 10. 1/2 equals 5/10. 3/5 equals 6/10. This is a case in which we cannot subtract, right? 5 is less than 6, so we're going to have to make this improper in order to do this, okay? So we're going to make our mixed number improper. 2 times 10 is 20, plus 5 is 25, so we have 25/10 minus 6/10, which is 1 and, excuse me, not 1 and, it should be 19/10, and then that will be, when we make it proper, 1 and 9/10. Okay, and remember we talked at this step that you could have like regrouped if you wanted to. So you take 1 away and make it into 10/10, and so then you're doing 1 and 15/10 minus 6/10. You should have ended up at the same place regardless of which method you used. Okay, so for today we are building off of what we've been working on. We're going to be multiplying a fraction by a whole number. Multiplying a fraction by a whole number, okay? So we're going to do a couple things to get us ready for going over our notes, which are in our math resource binder. So when we talk about fractions, I'm going to look at this with unit bars. So in this case, this is our whole, okay? And when we talk about fractions, right, we might divide it into chunks. So we have thirds here. And then if I said how much of this is shaded, we're talking about thirds, right? And it's 2/3, okay? Or if we divided this into fourths and I shaded 1, we'd say 1/4, right? So whole numbers, when we're looking at whole numbers, if I have a whole and I shade it, okay, that would be all of it, right? So we're talking about 1. We usually just call it 1. That's what we're going to do most of the time. However, when we're multiplying by fractions, we want to talk about a whole number being over 1. When you're expressing a whole number as a fraction, it's always going to be over 1 because we're saying 1 whole. That's what that means. Or if we have 3, that's the same thing as saying 3 over 1. 3 wholes, right? 3 wholes. 4 would be 4 over 1. 4 wholes, okay? Again, most of the time we're not going to be expressing our whole numbers in that way. It's not really a very useful or helpful way of expressing whole numbers. But for today's exercise, we really want to do that. So anytime you're expressing a whole number as a fraction, it's always going to be over 1, okay? And then when it comes to multiplication of fractions, we have a rule, okay, which is this. We're always going to do the numerator times the numerator over the denominator times the denominator, okay? This is our rule for multiplication of fractions moving forward, okay? So we're going to put both of these things into place today with our lesson. The first thing I'd like you to do is to make sure you have out multiplying a fraction by a whole number. We're going to go through these notes together first, and then we'll get into our practice for today. So, multiplying a fraction by a whole number. For example, and this is the example problem we're going to have, is 2/3 times 6. So step 1 is to express the whole number as a fraction over 1. Okay, this is building off of what I just showed you. Okay, so that whole number is 6, and remember, a whole number as a fraction is always going to be that number over 1, so 6 over 1. So step 1, we're saying 2/3 times 6 over 1. So now we have this, if possible, simplify in advance. And so how do we do this? When we look at simplifying in advance, we want to look at our diagonal pairs. Okay, so when I say diagonal pairs, we have 2 sets of diagonal pairs here. Okay, this is a diagonal pair, and this is a diagonal pair. Okay, so we want to look at these diagonal pairs and say, can I simplify in advance? Meaning, do these numbers share a factor other than 1? 2 and 1 do not share a factor that's different than 1, but 3 and 6 do. These are both divisible by 3. So we can do that. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. Okay, so this is how we're going to simplify in advance. Next, we apply that rule that I just wrote on the whiteboard behind me, which is that we multiply the numerator by the numerator and the denominator by the denominator. So once we've simplified, if we look up here, right, we ended up with 2 over 1, 2 over 1, once we simplified. So 2 over 1 times 2 over 1 is 2 times 2 over 1 times 1, or 4 over 1. And our final step, we should be getting familiar with this as we're working on fractions, is to simplify or make proper if necessary. So we're back at 4 over 1, which, remember, 4 over 1 is the same thing as just writing 4. So 2/3 times 6 equals 4. Having gone through this, a couple of things to note. If you miss step 2, okay, if you don't simplify in advance like step 2 says, that's okay. It just means that when you get to this step 4, you're definitely going to have to simplify at the end. So if you don't simplify here, you'll have to simplify here. That's fine. It truly will make things easier for you if you do it here, because you're going to be dealing with smaller numbers, and down here you might be dealing with really large numbers, but it's okay. Okay. I also want to say, we just went through this. Maybe you're feeling like, I don't know if I get it. That's totally fine. We're going to go through some practice problems right now. We're going to be in your textbook, 5th graders, on page 65. You're going to see that they give us some sample problems, and they have pictures with it too. And those pictures are kind of showing you the physical reason why the math works. Okay, so we have this process, this algorithm, it's called, that we're going to do. And then they'll show us in a picture why the math works. So we're starting off with number 1, which asks us to multiply. Thank you while I get situated. Okay. Multiply 1/2 by 8. Okay, 1/2 by 8. So step 1 tells us to express the whole number as a fraction over 1. In other words, 1/2 stays the same. 8, we're going to write as 8 over 1. Remember, it's 8 wholes. Now we're supposed to, if possible, simplify in advance, which, again, remember, we look at our diagonal pairs. And we ask ourselves, do they share a factor other than 1? So this diagonal pair, 1 and 1, they don't share a factor other than 1. But 2 and 8, those do. Those are both divisible by 2. So we're going to do that. So what I do is cross it out. 2 divided by 2 is 1. We cross out 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Okay. Now we multiply numerator times numerator. So 1 times 4 is 4. And denominator times denominator. 1 times 1 is 1. Final step is to simplify or make proper if necessary, and it is 4, okay? So again, if you didn't simplify here, what you would have done is 1 times 8 is 8, 2 times 1 is 2, and you would have ended up with 8 halves, which you would have had to simplify to 4. So here's our picture, right? They're basically saying, how much would we get if we had 8 halves, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 halves. Put them together, and we end up with 4 wholes. So this is the pictorial representation of the work that we just did here. That shows us that 1/2 of 8 is the same as 4. Let's try, I'll move this aside again. It's getting tricky with that in the way. Okay, so 2 tells us to multiply 1/4 by 6. So remember, the first step of our notes tells us to rewrite our whole number as a fraction over 1. Step 2 says, if possible, simplify in advance. So again, remember, we're looking at these diagonal pairs. 1 and 1 are never going to be simplified any further, but 6 and 4 do share a factor. What factor do they share? That's right, 2. So we're going to divide them both by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Now we multiply. Numerator times numerator, so 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. Denominator times denominator. And now we're on to step 4, which tells us to simplify or make proper if necessary. This number is simplified, however, it is not proper. So we would rewrite it as a mixed number, 1 1/2. Which again, if you look at our picture here, walks us through that, right? We have 6/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you put them together, you're going to end up with 1 whole and 1/2. Okay, number 3 is asking us to multiply 2/3 by 4. So again, we rewrite the problem with the whole number as a fraction over 1. And now we check to see if we can simplify. You don't have to circle these. I keep doing it because I'm trying to show it to you, but it's not something you necessarily have to do yourselves. 2 and 1. The only factor they share is 1, so we can't simplify. 3 and 4. The only factor they share is 1, so we cannot simplify. So that means in this case we cannot simplify in advance, okay? So now we multiply. Numerator times numerator, 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 1 is 3. We end up with 8/3. Step 4 tells us to simplify or make proper. It does need to be made proper. So either you're doing your division off to the side, or you can look and say, how many times do I get 3 out of 8? I can do it twice with how many left over? 2 left over, so 2 and 2/3. And again, if you look at the picture that they provided for you, this is 2/3, 2/3, 2/3, 2/3. So we have 2/3 4 times, and when you combine them together, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8/3, we end up with 1, 2, 3, a whole, 4, 5, 6, a whole, and then 2 more. So 2 and 2/3. Right? Okay, I am going to walk you through the first 3 of number 4. So I'll do 4A, B, and C. And then I'm going to have you do the remainder yourself. So keep working along with me on these next 3 problems. 4A tells us 1/5 times 3. So we rewrite the problem with the whole number as a fraction over 1. Now we look at our diagonal pairs. We cannot simplify. They only have a factor of 1 shared between them. So now we multiply across. 1 times 3, 3. 5 times 1 is 5. So 3/5. Step 4 says make proper or simplify. This already is proper and already is simplified. So we're done. Our answer is 3/5. B tells us 1/3 times 6. We rewrite as a fraction, a whole number as a fraction over 1. And now we check our diagonal pairs. Can we simplify? Yeah, we can. These both have a factor of 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now we multiply across. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. We cannot simplify, but we can make proper. 2 over 1 is 2. All right, 4C. 1/6 times 8. We rewrite this problem with a whole number as a fraction over 1. We check, can we simplify in advance? Yes, we can. 6 divided by 2, they both share a factor of 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now we multiply across. 1 times 4 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3. And we check. Can I simplify? No. Can I make proper? Yeah. This is equal to 1 and 1/3. Fifth graders, I would like you now to pause. I would like you to do 4D, 4E, and 4F on your own. Come on back then and see how you did. 4D says 3/8 times 4. We rewrite 3/8 times 4 over 1. We check if we can simplify in advance. We can. 8 and 4 share a factor of 4. So 8 divided by 4 is 2. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Now we multiply across. 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 1 is 2. We cannot simplify, but we can make proper. This is equal to 1/2. 4E, 7/10 times 5. We rewrite as a fraction over 1. Can we simplify in advance? Yeah, we can, right? 10 and 5 share a factor of 5. We can divide both of these by 5. We multiply across. 7 times 1 is 7. 2 times 1 is 2. This is simplified, however, it is not proper. We need to make it proper. When we do so, we should get 3/2. And F, 5/12 times 4. So we rewrite as a fraction over 1. We simplify in advance. These are both divisible by 4. We multiply across. 5 times 1 is 5. 3 times 1 is 3. This is simplified. It is not proper, though. We rewrite it as 1 2/3. So fifth graders, if you did not simplify in advance for any of these, what you should have noticed then is when you got here, you would have had to simplify, right? If you don't simplify here, then it means you have to simplify here. Again, it still works, but if we're getting very large numbers, for instance, let's say we did like, I don't know, I'm going to give you an example that's super big just to really show you. Let's say we're doing 22/30 times 5/44. Okay, so if you didn't simplify in advance and you multiplied across, you would end up with 110 1,320ths. Okay, oh, you can't even see that. That's a large number to try to go ahead and simplify. Whereas if we simplify in advance, we could have said that these are both divisible by 22. These are both divisible by 5. And we end up with 1/12. So doing it here is a lot simpler than waiting here, and then we'd have to start kind of figuring out what kind of common factors, and it would take you a while probably. Let's say you just kept dividing by 2. You'd have to do that over and over and over again. So this is the reason that we are simplifying in advance. It really helps us in the long run, okay? So I've been saying it a lot lately, right? This whole checkpoint thing. So this is checkpoint 1. How did those 3 problems go? Okay. Did you struggle or did it go okay? Next, you're going to work on the practice problems and use the key. Again, once you get to this key part, you got to check. How did I do? Do I understand any mistakes that I might have made, or did I do well and not make a lot of mistakes? So that's your second checkpoint to see if I need to reach out and ask for help. Once you've done the practice problems and you're feeling confident, go ahead and you're going to work on your homework, which is workbook pages 60 and 61. Once you've done those workbook pages, you're going to go ahead and upload pictures and submit. Okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.